Our first panel that we're going to experience is called Dharma in Action, and I have the privilege of chairing this panel, so I'm going to be introducing each of the speakers. And our first speaker is Dr. Venu Mehta of Claremont School of Theology. Dr. Mehta is someone I've known quite a long time, in fact, even before she was Dr. Mehta, and very happy to see the kind of work she's been doing in Jain Studies. Her presentation is called Theology Without Mercy, Jain Forgiveness, Foucault, and the Ethics of Human Agency. So, Dr. Mehta, please come forward.
Thank you, Dr. Long. It's so nice to be here. Mike. Okay. I need to get heard. Yes. We have all been enjoying and sharing our joy with each other for past 2 days now. It's almost like 2 days now. Good morning. My thanks to Dr. Veena Howard and the California State University Fresno, and of course Ubere Foundation and other organizations that are putting together this important conference. And it's really an honor to join my colleague, senior, and of course junior, and my contemporary. In my presentation today, I aim to discuss the Jain theology of forgiveness. My focus is on how forgiveness functions in a tradition without a creator God, a divine will, or a salvific grace. In Jainism, divinity does not forgive. The jinas, the liberated ones, do not intervene in human lives to pardon sins, and yet Jain theology and practice place forgiveness at the very heart of ethical spiritual life. What I will explore is how forgiveness becomes a rigorous discipline of self-fashioning, accountability, and moral transformation. This inquiry is relevant because it complicates dominant theological and philosophical assumptions that forgiveness is always tied to a divine mercy. By examining Jain material alongside with Foucault's notion of technologies of the self, I hope to show that Jainism contributes to the comparative theology, interreligious ethics, and contemporary conversation about peace and justice. This inquiry is relevant because it challenges the common assumption that forgiveness is always tied to divine mercy. It also allows us to approach Jainism in its own context, rather than through colonial or Eurocentric framework that impose a universal template on religions. This presentation also draws from my larger academic work on forgiveness, where I place Jain thoughts in conversation with interdisciplinary and interreligious approach. In doing so, I aim to highlight both its distinctiveness and its wider relevance for ethics, theology, and peace building. The Jain narrative corpus, particularly the Upasak Dashaha Sutra, preserves an illuminating episode about Shravak Anand, a devout lay follower of Jinnah Mahavir. When Anand Shravak attained an extraordinary degree of avadhi jnana, clairvoyant knowledge, Gautama, Lord Mahavir's chief disciple, doubted that such an attainment could not belong to a lay person. Gautama urged Anand to perform prayaschit, atonement for false speech. Ananda replied with dignity, "Does one repent for speaking the truth?" Gautama deferred the matter to Jinnah Mahavira, who confirmed that Anand's, the lay person's, attainment is true. And he instructed Gautama, his own chief disciple, Gautama, to seek forgiveness from him. Gautama immediately set aside his alms and went to Ananda, the layperson, confessed his mistake and asked for pardon. What strikes me in this episode is that authority in Jainism is not secured by infallibility, but by accountability. Forgiveness is not dispensed as divine mercy from above. Rather, it enacted as disciplined ethical practice within. Monks, lay people, even chief disciple himself, no one is exempt from the responsibility of asking forgiveness when wrong is done. This narrative sets the stage for my argument. Jain theology of forgiveness is a theology without mercy, yet it is rich in ethical rigor. Why forgiveness? This brings us to the central question why one should forgive in and as per Jain Dharma or Jainism. What motivates forgiveness in a tradition where divine figures, the Jinas, the Tirthankaras, do not pardon and where salvific grace is absent? Several motives represent themselves. Forgiveness honors ahimsa, the principle of non-violence, by restraining anger and harm. It embodies karuna, compassion towards all being, even beyond human. It expresses anekantvad, humility before the multiplicity of perspectives. It fulfills aparigraha, non-possessiveness, and we are going to listen about aparigraha very soon. Non-possessiveness by loosening the grip of resentment, and it functions karmically, preventing accumulation of harmful karmic matter. The answer, however, is one of this alone, but a layered integration. Forgiveness weaves together compassion, humility, self-restraint, karmic accountability into a comprehensive discipline of self-fashioning. Here, Michel Foucault's concept of technologies of self becomes useful. In his 1982 lecture at the University of Vermont in Technologies of the Self, this seminar with Foucault, Foucault defined this as a practice which permit individual to effect by their own means or with the help of others a certain number of operations on their own, bodies and souls, thought, conduct, and way of being, so as to transform themselves in order to attain a certain state of happiness, purity, wisdom, perfection, or mortality. Foucault's point is that ethic is not simply the obedience to a law imposed from outside, whether divine command or a state regulation, but the conscious shaping of the self through discipline and reflection. In Jainism, forgiveness fits precisely this frame. To ask for or to grant kshama is forgiveness, is not mediated by divine pardon, but enacted as deliberate technology of self-transformation by confessing fault, that is called alochana, repenting, pratikramana, disciplining passions to control over kashayas. The Jain moral subject actively reconstitute themselves. This is why Jainism describes forgiveness as dharma, not just rule following, but a profound mode of ethical conduct. It is the exercise of self-regulation, sanyam, that lightens karmic bondage and reorient one towards liberation, moksha. In Foucauldian term, Jain forgiveness exemplifies how care for the self is inseparable from ethical life. To forgive is simultaneously to cultivate humility, to dismantle ego, and to reconstruct one's subjectivity around non-violence and accountability. The canonical text codify forgiveness as central to ethical life. For example, the Uttaradhana Sutra, one of the Mula Sutras of the Shvetambara Jain tradition, composed in Ardhamagdi Prakrit, instructs monks to confess faults, do the alochana, perform repentance, pratikramana, and beg for forgiveness, ask for the kshamapana. Importantly, forgiveness is paired with kshanti, patience, forbearance as a twin discipline. Together, they overcome the affliction of anger, pride, deceit, and greed. The texts do not represent forgiveness as a sentiment or occasional pardon, but as a structured ascetic technology. It is the avashyaka, the essential duty practiced daily, ritually, and communally. I will skip the definition part because I think I talked a lot. Forgiveness in Jain Dharma is not more merely defined as in abstract terms, but it embodies through stories that belongs to Dharma Kathanu Yoga, meaning the scriptural tradition and of moral and religious narratives. These tales illustrate how kings, monks, lay people enacted the virtue of forgiveness in practice. The texts like Uttaradhan Sutra, Rayapasanya Sutras, and so on and so forth, often associated with this tradition, as they represent narrative with moral lessons, and they correlate with the canonical philosophies along with the ethical structure. And I present a couple of examples and the stories that I really love and liked and learned a lot, both as a researcher and as an individual. The story of King Sanjaya that falls in the Uttaradhan Sutra, chapter 18, is about that King Sanjaya once committed violence against a monk. I think I need to change the slide, right? Okay. Against a monk. When confronted, he repented, sought forgiveness, and transformed his life, embracing non-violence. Forgiveness here is not passive tolerance, but moral reorientation. So each story will tell how you go towards forgiveness, with what approach, with what transformation. Second example is again from Uttaradhan Sutra. King Nami renounced his throne after realizing that anger and pride entrapped the soul. His act of forgiveness was directed not outward but inward, conquering the passion within, the ego within. Third story is from Rayapasanya Sutra, and it's about the king Pradesi. He endured humiliation without anger, showing how patience and forgiveness sustain ethical resilience. Gajasukumal. This is a very interesting story, and who Gajasukumal is, when you learn, so according to this Jain text, he's a brother of Lord Krishna. Gajasukumal, even in suffering, remained free of hatred, exemplifying forgiveness in spiritual strength. Gajasukumal's account is recorded in Bhagavad Aradhana with other ascetics heroes who, by undergoing severe penance. These examples show forgiveness not as weakness, but as conquest of passions. Forgiveness becomes heroic, making a marker of true strength. That's what Gandhi says, right? It's the true strength is to forgive. Is to adopt to non-violence. I'm coming to an end. Do I have 5 minutes? Okay. Forgiveness in Jainism is again only not philosophy, not narrative, but is also some sort of bodily practices that connects with the mental and emotional practices. Going beyond the textual and narrative part, but forgiveness are imbibed into the lived communally, and it is lived communally. Of course, it is lived individually, but it is also lived communally through the ritual called pratikramana during the Paryushan and Kshamapana. Rituals such as pratikramana and Paryushan are among the clearest example of how Jainism reinforces forgiveness as a technology of the self. The daily ritual of pratikramana, performed by monks and lay people alike, involve confession, repentance, and asking for forgiveness as an embodied practice of ethical accountability. At the conclusion of the Paryushan festival, Jains greet one another with the phrase "Michhami Dukadam," meaning "May my fault be forgiven." And there is no difference between age gap or gender, class, society. There's no difference. You ask and for forgiveness, and you grant forgiveness to one another, everybody, even to the souls without. So it's beyond even human. The annual festival of Kshamavani further formalizes this ethic as collective discipline, ensuring that forgiveness is not simply an individual virtue, but a shared social ethic. Seen through Foucauldian lens, these rituals are not empty repetitions, but transformative exercise. So if you miss to repent and confess and change yourself this year, next year you're still there. So they cultivate humility, regulate passions, and purify the self in community with others. In order to conclude, I would say that the Jain theology of forgiveness is a theology without mercy, but where is Kojan Bhai? Kojan Bhai said like mercy is a very loaded term, and so we need to understand in the context. And the Jinas do not forgive, but they teach forgiveness as an indispensable discipline, placing responsibility squarely upon human agency and human agent. And as I have suggested that Foucault's notion of technologies of self, forgiveness in Jainism is not a plea of mercy, but a rigorous practice of accountability. This way, Jainism offers a non-theistic model of forgiveness that one grounds peace and justice in accountability rather than divine pardon, and invites us to cultivate both self and community towards nonviolence, patience, and liberation. Thank you.
That's right. We've decided that already. Okay, thank you, Dr. Mehta. If anyone has any questions, please remember them or note them down. We're going to have time for questions for all the four speakers after they've all presented. So our next presenter is Dr. Shivani Botra, someone else I've known a long time, all the way back to the International School of Jain Studies in 2011. And she's come a long way since then. So please welcome Dr. Botra. She's going to be speaking on Dharma in motion, everyday ahimsa, and maternal agency in urban Jain households. So please welcome Dr. Botra.
Thank you so much, Professor Long. And I echo all the good words spoken for Dr. Veena Howard for this conference, for Oberoi Foundation. I am equally grateful to Oberoi for their donation, for their grants that also help us do conferences. But today, I especially feel really honored to be part of this group, to thank Veena Howard to inviting me for presenting my research and paper here with everyone. So, Dharma in motion, everyday ethics and maternal agency in urban Jain household. This research is part of a larger article that I'm writing, a bigger study which follows from my PhD dissertation. So I have kind of put together in order to fit 15 to 20 minutes, Dr. Long. This paper explores how Jain mothers in contemporary urban India practice and transmit the principles of ahimsa amid shifting domestic, educational, and social landscapes. I will show that these mothers are not passive custodians of inherited values, but active interpreters of dharma, recasting ahimsa as both a vow and a lived negotiated discipline. By centering maternal agency and care as religious practice, the paper reframes Jain lay ethics not as derivative of monastic ideals, but as vital, dynamic expression of dharma in motion. In doing so, it contributes to a broader understanding of how nonviolence is cultivated in the everyday and how women's domestic and moral labor shapes the contours of ethical life in South Asian traditions. Drawing on the theoretical lens of dichotomy, which denotes the experience of living under multiple, often competing normative systems, I argue that Jain women navigate overlapping demands from religious texts, family expectations, educational institutions, and their own professional aspirations. Rather than treating tradition and modernity as oppositional, Jain mothers engage in a form of spiritual improvisation, balancing fidelity to Jain principles with the fluid needs of contemporary life. I built my argument based on interviews with Jain mothers because canonical Jain literature, like much of Indian religious discourse, rarely treats motherhood as a distinct category. Instead, it portrays women in ambivalent terms, at times venerating them as mothers of Tirthankars or paragons of renunciation, and at other times casting them as lacking in right faith, ashraddha, deluders, mohini, or sources of karmic bondage. Whether these portrayals present a bright or dark side of womanhood, they offer minimal attention to the specific practices of mothering or to women's formative role in shaping children's religious identity. This lacuna renders the everyday labor of mothers largely invisible in Jain history, even though it remains central to the intergenerational transmission of values. By bringing these maternal practices into focus, the paper highlights how Jain mothers not only preserve tradition but also creatively reinterpret it in response to contemporary life. I asked 3 specific questions. What aspects of Jainism do mothers consider essential for their children to know, to value, and to practice today? What pedagogical methods and narrative strategies do they employ? And how do they negotiate traditional teachings within today's challenges? Using both narrative literature and ethnographic tools, I proceed in 4 thematic sections: conceptual, ritual, social, and personal. The first section examines canonical portrayals of women as embodied power, Shakti. The second section examines ritual adaptation, focusing on how mothers modify practices to suit their children's development and emotional needs. The third section investigates the social dimension of religious upbringing, including peer influence, community expectations. The final section reflects on the emotional aspect of religious motherhood, exploring how feelings of joy, guilt, uncertainty, and fulfillment shape women's experiences of transmitting faith. So in today's presentation, I focus on the first 3. I don't think I'll have time to undergo the 4th section. I began the inquiry with a close reading of Jain sources in Prakrit and Hindi that addresses women's roles. While references to women are scattered across canonical and narrative literature, explicit treatment of motherhood is nearly absent. A noteworthy exception is the contemporary Hindi text, Jain Agam Mein Nari, Women in Jain Canonical Literature, which compiles numerous discussions on women across scriptures, especially on virtueness and chastity, but it remains silent on the topic of mothering. Where mothering is referenced, it is typically in relation to the exalted status of mothers of Tirthankars, as I mentioned before, or exemplary monks. They are honored more for their symbolic function than for maternal experiences. I now move to the first section, which is conceptual. It is well-established fact that from conceptual onward, the mother becomes the child's first teacher, not through formal instruction, but through embodied gestures, soothing rhythms, and emotional presence. Among these, early forms of communication, lullabies hold particular significance. At the outset of my inquiry into religious transmission, I turned to Jain nuns and asked them whether their decision to embrace ascetic life had been shaped by their mothers and how often they themselves spoke of maternal agencies in their regular discourses. Many nuns responded that their earliest encounters with Jain values came through their mothers' practices, dietary discipline, storytelling, or devotional routines. Several even recall hearing the story of Madalsa from their mothers. All nuns did not place equal emphasis on maternal influence, yet the conversations revealed that mothers often served as an implicit foundation for shaping ascetic identity, even if this role was rarely foregrounded in formal teaching. When I posed similar questions to Jain mothers, the responses pointed in a parallel but distinct direction. My respondents described their everyday strategies for transmitting Jain values through food practices, ritual participation, and narrative instruction. Many likewise invoked the story of Madalsa. For them, the story represented an archetypal ideal motherhood, demonstrating how narrative itself becomes both a pedagogical tool and a source of inspiration in religious upbringing. Curious about the textual origin of the story of Madalsa, I searched Jain scriptures and narrative literature, but did not find any canonical references. Instead, interestingly, I encountered the story in a secondary compilation by a Jain monk, though the compiler's name is missing. Further research revealed that its earliest literary appearance occurs in Hindu sources, particularly the Markandeya Puran. Yet the story's ethical spirit resonates as strongly with Jain values that it has been naturally integrated into the devotional and pedagogical repertoires of Jain household. In this sense, the circulation of the Madalsa story exemplifies a form of vernacular theology in which women appropriate and reinterpret cross-cultural traditional narratives to assert maternal agency and sustain Jain values across generations. Now, the story of Madalsa. The story is retold in Chitrabhanu's autobiography, Man with a Vision, where it serves as the book's auspicious beginning. In this retelling, Madalsa sings to her child a sacred verse in Prakrit. I skipped this Prakrit verse to save time, but the translation is, "You are liberated, awakened, and pure, free from the illusions of worldly existence, awake from the slumber of delusion." In the narrative, Madalsa is portrayed as a queen who, from the time her children were in the womb through their early childhood, sang lullabies that conveyed profound metaphysical truth. As she rocked them to sleep, she reminded them of their true nature, pure, unbound, and untouched by worldly illusion. The transformative power of her words was such that 7 of her sons chose the path of renunciation, becoming monks and saints. Anxious about the succession of his kingdom, the king eventually pleaded with Madalsa to raise their next son as a ruler rather than a renunciate. Symbolically, the story underscores the maternal Shakti power to orient a child's moral and spiritual trajectory. Chitrabhanu interprets the rhyme as a spiritual invocation, recognizing the child's innate state of liberation, detachment, and clarity. For far from lulling the child to sleep, Madalsa's song calls for wakefulness, urging the soul to recognize its true nature and purpose. For the Jain women I interviewed, the story of Madalsa often became the starting point for discussion on religious upbringing. Many spoke of her as the ideal mother, an exemplar of early ethical cultivation and spiritual initiation. Whether or not the story belongs to the Jain canonical literature, it has become deeply embedded in Jain pedagogical practice, functioning as a vernacular Jain narrative that affirms the mother's role as both nurturer and moral guide. In this sense, Madalsa operates as a cross-traditional archetype. As such, the story offers a striking counterpoint to canonical Jain texts where women are frequently depicted as impediments to spiritual progress. Here, the mother emerges not only as a nurturer, but as a transmitter of liberation-oriented knowledge. I now move on to the second section, which is ritual adaptation for everyday transmission. Catherine Bell argues that ritual is not simply the performance of prescribed actions, but a dynamic cultural process through which communities express, embody, and negotiate their values. In the context of contemporary Jain motherhood, ritual becomes a key medium through which religious knowledge is translated, reinterpreted, and transmitted to children. For many mothers with whom I interacted, religious cultivation emerged less as the rote teaching of rules, but more as a deeply embodied adaptive practices of ritual transmission. This section examines the dilemmas mothers face as they balance Jain commitments with the demands of modern secular life, conflicting expectations at school, peer pressure, and varying interpretations within extended families and communities. Our one professional mother reflected on her role in transmitting religious values, particularly when compared to the authority of monks and nuns. She emphasized the widening gap between the way Jainism is traditionally taught by ascetics and lived realities of children in contemporary Jain world. In her view, children often struggle to relate to the renunciatory ideals presented by mendicants where they respond more readily with when values are conveyed by lay people who share their cultural and social environment. Quote, she says, there is a gap between how Jainism is taught by monks and nuns and the way we are living today. The kids cannot imagine that kind of life, so they cannot relate. But when I explain Jain values to my children, they connect. My role as a mother is not just to transmit values, but to ensure that children develop reverence for the lifestyle that monks and nuns choose. This reflection highlights a broader dynamic within contemporary Jainism. The reallocation of religious authority from mendicants to lay actors, particularly mothers. While monks and nuns continue to be revered as custodians of scriptural knowledge, their renunciatory lifestyle often feels distant and unattainable to children growing up in urban middle-class Jain families. By contrast, mothers inhabit the same social and cultural space as their children and can translate abstract principles into practical, relatable terms. The shift does not diminish the role of ascetics, but repositions mothers as indispensable mediators of tradition. In my fieldwork, many respondents emphasized this practical dimension of transmission, demonstrating how religious knowledge is enabled and adapted with domestic space. For example, Aparna Jain, mother of two daughters aged 11 and 9, considers her role not just as a caregiver but as a Jain mother, a responsibility she describes as sacred and expansive. She says, my biggest responsibility is not only to transfer the right values to my children, but to amplify the values and present them in a better way. She introduces her children to key Jain principles such as not eating after sunset, drinking only filtered water, and daily temple visits. Because she herself grew up observing these practices, integrating them into her children's life felt natural. This process was smooth until her daughters began attending mainstream schools where new challenges emerged. Several other respondents expressed similar concerns. Aparna further emphasizes regular participation in temple visits, recitation of devotional hymns, stavans, and partial observance of 6 daily essential avashak, often choosing 3 rituals suited to her children's age. So out of 6, she chooses 3. And the 3 are paying respect to monks and nuns, ritual repentance, and going to temples. On the 8th and 14th day of the lunar calendar, she performs Samaik. I will just briefly talk about Samaik because it's very interesting the way this Jain mother, Aparna, she reinterprets this ritual of Samaik. So, of many examples, Aparna's adaptation of Samaik, the ritual of equanimity performed to cultivate inner stillness, detachment, and ethical reflection. Traditionally undertaken by both householders and ascetics, Samaik requires a contemporary withdrawal from worldly activity to focus on spiritual self-discipline. Aparna emphasizes not only the ritual's spiritual value, but also its formative influence on her daughter's sense of discipline and calm. Quote, she says, she says this for her daughter. She may not understand every philosophical term, but she knows this is a time to slow down, to be quiet, and to reflect. In the domestic setting, Samaik becomes a shared ethical experience, a way of fostering attentiveness, restraint, and a pause from the distraction of school schedules, and digital life. This material adaptation reflects what Bell calls ritualization, in which the body is trained through repeated meaningful gestures that cultivate moral awareness. So this is the quotes. It also shows how mothers recalibrate complex spiritual practices into child friendly formats without diluting their ethical potency. Instead of formalized scripture recitation, some mothers use simplified prayers or karm katha to guide their children through the spirit of ritual. Whitney Kelton's research offers an illuminating backdrop to this maternal transmission. The maternal adaptation of ritual is not a departure from orthodoxy but a continuation of Jain devotional life and embodied hermeneutics where scriptural ideals are lived, recontextualized, and passed on. These everyday negotiations of ritual practices open into a wider social domain how Jain mothers navigate community space, kinship, expectations, and collective religious events as part of their moral and cultural labor. How are we doing, Dr. Long? We have time? Okay. So if ritual adaptation reflects the microcosm of religious continuity with the home, the social domain makes these negotiations public, exposing them to peer cultures, institutions, and community expectations. In my interview with homemakers and working mothers, food practices emerged as one of the most visible and socially negotiated aspects of Jain mothering. This is quite interesting. Many mothers referred to Mool Guna, a basic ethical code of dietary restraint which prohibits the consumption of honey, alcohol, flesh, and certain fruits deemed harmful to living beings. They also discussed Saptavasan, 7 categories of addiction, from intoxicants to gambling, which, while not yet relevant to their young children, were framed as moral boundaries to be respected as they grow older. Especially today, children often present logical arguments in favor of eggs, citing their nutritional value, their common presence in peer diets, of their easy availability in packaged food. Mothers described such debates as particularly challenging since they required not only regulation but also dialogue. In these moments, dietary restrictions become an arena of negotiation and pedagogy as mothers frame Jain commitments. Children's rational inquiry prompts mothers to re-articulate values in ways that are both persuasive and contextually relevant. Aparna expressed this sense of responsibility with striking clarity. One of the earliest challenges came when her daughters began attending mainstream school and were exposed to snacks like potato chips. Rather than forbidding them outright, she started making homemade banana chips as an alternative, an act of adaptation that was as much social negotiation as it was ritual creativity, reinforcing Jain dietary ethics while allowing her children to participate in peer food culture without feeling excluded. Sorry? Okay, yeah. So this one paragraph and then I do the conclusion. Birthday parties presented another site of negotiation. Many such gatherings took place in the evening when eating would violate the principle of not consuming food after sunset, and cake often contained eggs. Rather than prohibiting attendance, Aparna sometimes compensated with a special meal at home, culinary creativity serving as both ethical reinforcement and an emotional balm for potential feeling of exclusion. So I will not, Dr. Long has been very sweet to me. So I move on to the conclusion. I have a lot of stuff in here, but we have limitation of time. This paper, so just to recap, this paper highlights an unexplored aspect of Jain life, the role of mothers as agents of religious transmission. While scholarship has often focused on women as ascetics, ritual participation, or models of devotional wifehood, maternal labor has rarely been examined as a distinct form of religious practice. The ethnographic accounts presented here show how mothers not only preserve tradition but also actively reshape them in response to the need of migration, modern education, and urban middle class life. Two contributions follow from this analysis. First, maternal agency demonstrates how Jainism is sustained not only through canonical authority but through everyday negotiations, where practices such as storytelling, food discipline, and ritual adaptations translate abstract doctrines into lived ethics. Second, maternal strategic foreground importance of relational pedagogy, transmitting values through formal instructions, not through formal instructions, but through embodied presence, narrative creativity, and intimate care. By situating Jain motherhood within the broader frame, the paper repositions mothers as central actors in the reproduction and transformation of Jain identity. Thank you so much for your patience.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Botra. Thank you very much. And so we need to keep moving along. So our next speaker, someone I know very well, having had the joy and privilege of being married to her for the last 30 years. Please welcome my colleague at Elizabethtown College, Dr. Mahua Bhattacharya. She's bringing her therapist's insight to the topic Gandhi's Satyagraha and its intimate connections with yoga.
Good morning, everybody. I am a little nervous because I feel that my presentation is not as well articulated as you know, Venu and Shivani. But I really am very grateful to Dr. Baba Jain and Dr. Clooney, who actually allowed me to create the space for my interpretation of what, okay. So you know, how to interpret, excuse me. I'm like a professor, you know, always talking to a big group of students and not really realizing that I'm not audible sometimes. But anyway, it is what it is. So, yeah, I'm extremely grateful to Dr. Howard and, you know, the Uberai Foundation. I think I know you now as my friends, and I feel very grateful to be here today. So my presentation is kind of exploring the connection between something that is not very well studied. You know, everybody knows about Gandhi's contribution to India's liberation movement, you know, the Salt March, which Dr. Jain talked about yesterday, and all the other elements that is directly related to the freedom struggle. But I'm more interested in some other aspect of Gandhi's practices that I feel would be extremely useful for our contemporary problems of alienation and isolation. And so I'm very interested in the idea of the ashram concept, the experiment that Gandhi did with a group of people, like-minded people, and what he tried to do in his ashram. It's very similar to the Vedanta Society's practice of retreats. And I want to actually maybe connect that to my own interest in counseling and mental health issues that are you know, being faced by our society today. So I think everybody probably knows this song, and I almost feel like calling on Anuji to sing this song for us. But we'll just, you know, I'll just kind of be a little impromptu and sing this just because it's also one of my favorite bhajans. So Gandhi goes, Vaishnava jan to tene, sorry, kahiye je pir parai jane re. Sorry, my voice really hurts. पर दुख उपकार करे तोए मन अभिमान नाने रे. Oh my God, it's really bad. Anyhow, the idea is a true spiritual person is one who understands the suffering of others, helps those who are in misery, but never lets pride enter their mind. As you can see, there are multiple nuances to this bhajan that actually intimately connects with what Gandhi's ashram tried to do. So it is the philosophy of the poet Narasimha Mehta, and it embodies the concept of Jivadaya, a form of ahimsa that experiences the pain of others and associates with bhakti, devotion to God. Now, what is interesting about both Gandhi and the Vedanta Society, it actually tries to integrate the four yogas, right? I mean, we have Jnana Yoga, we have Raja Yoga, we have Karma Yoga, and we have Bhakti Yoga, that's right. So what is interesting there is when you go to a retreat in a Vedanta Society, you will find all these elements present. And what was interesting in Gandhi's ashram as well, that you sort of see all these elements be very much present in not only in the philosophy that he embodied, but and the practices that he kind of pioneered. So my current interest, my project is basically related to an idea that I'm exploring. I am teaching Japanese and Asian studies in Elizabethtown College, and what I'm trying to do is actually introduce ideas of Asian forms of healing in my contribution to the major that we have in Asian studies in E-Town. So as you know, this is a very famous, call to action by the Surgeon General Vivek Murthy in 2023, a little while ago, where he actually talks a little bit about the current epidemic of loneliness and alienation that is a major public health risk for both individuals and society today. So what we have seen in mental health practices today is that yoga and mindfulness has become mainstreamed. So some of the common therapeutic modalities that are used is the mindfulness-based stress reduction act, which is completely a repurposing of Vedanta, and that is what we call action and commitment therapy. You have DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, and then you have mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So as you can see that while there is a lot of incorporation of mindfulness in our modern counseling practices, you actually see that while mindfulness is being adopted, there is a superficiality in this adoption. And I think that just to connect that idea is to look at what Gandhi proposed, and of course Vivekananda and Ramakrishna were his forerunners in some sense. So, two fortuitous events. That is, we already know Gandhi's status as a political figure, the Mahatma and the father of India. But the two fortuitous events, which actually Dr. Jain also mentioned yesterday, and that is his practicing law in South Africa and facing discrimination. So there you sort of see, the pivotal moment where he was thrown out from his first-class compartment in South Africa and being beaten by his white fellow travelers. So that allowed him to understand the plight of Indians at that time, and also sort of saw how discrimination is not only widely practiced, but that how it kind of impacts the lives of Indians in South Africa. What is interesting, and in my research I found, that in his practice, in his law practice, he found that he had to compromise more. So many of his legal cases, he actually worked on compromise rather than litigation in a very aggressive way. And you can see there a seed of his nonviolence being very strong. His establishment of ashrams in South Africa, the Phoenix Settlement in Durban, and the Tolstoy Forum in Johannesburg, and then his return to India, establishing ashrams, Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad and the Sevagram Ashram in Varda, actually, kind of leads to his own interest in creating an experiment that I think was very, very productive and also illustrative of how we can use his ideas to generate certain kinds of practices that can actually sort of fight the kind of mental health issues that we are now facing in our society. And so I found that in my own research in counseling, depression is a very common problem, not only in America today, but also amongst Indian, people residing in the US. So what he actually did, and this is where I'm going to just be a little bit more kind of intentional in how I see his ideas being useful in our own mental health professions. So, so what he did in his ashrams was that he saw that some of these practices that he was going to put in his everyday life was the overlapping political and spiritual goals. And what he found was that his small-scale experiments were useful for actually trying out ideas that could be then applied to larger-scale social, religious, and political problems. Mentena argues that Gandhi's satyagraha, nonviolent action that seeks to both constrain negative consequences of politics, and it also works towards reform of existing political relations and institutions. Ajay Eskaria argues that ashrams present an alternative politics that can be called nonviolent neighborliness, that acknowledges the differences between neighbors and seeks to create relations between them through tapasya, suffering, and I think sacrifice, as we heard from Dr. Clooney yesterday. So what it entailed was meeting the equal with mitrata, that is friendship, subordinate with seva, and that is service, and superiors, who were in control with satyagraha, and that is civil disobedience. So friendship based on equality and justice, and that is, the part that he emphasized in his experiments. So when he was sort of creating his ashrams, his Bible became the Bhagavad Gita. And we all know that it's a text emphasizing not only nonviolence, but disciplined action through self-sacrifice. So he experiments with living a simple life, reducing the amount of money spent on food, vegetarianism, and eliminating luxuries in one's life. And you actually see that even in Vedanta Society's retreats. His emphasis on karma yoga, disciplined action in pursuit of self-realization. This is very much part of what you also see play out in the current mental health modalities, especially of ACT, where you are looking at the acceptance of suffering in one's life and then working on, moving towards a commitment to a kind of action that actually allows for, a sort of detached action that is embodied in karma yoga. You also see that in karma yoga, the ideas of aparigraha and sambhava being present. You also see willingness to undergo suffering for the betterment of the community, for the community, whether they were in South Africa or India. Recitation of passages into morning and evening prayer sessions, and the compilation of the Bhagavad Gita, according to him, where he explained that the message is an internal struggle of the good and bad within all of us. So it is more or less a kind of, a practice that all of us need to follow in order to achieve our goals. He also stressed a daily discipline of physical work, cleaning lavatories, the spinning wheel, diet control, celibacy, and meditating upon the Gita. And here you actually see all the 4 yogas kind of playing a part in his daily life. So this is something that came up in our conversation yesterday. His affinity with the Vedanta Society and Ramakrishna. He actually wrote the preface to the Gospel of Ramakrishna. And then he also went to meet Vivekananda when he was, actually in his last days of his life. He tried to meet him, seeing the affinities that the Vedanta Society had put in place and his own action. So there is a lot of similarity in his philosophy with that. You also see the present-day practice of retreats and spiritual meditations. And maybe I can see that this is a space where one can actually create a community where we can share our pain, our sense of isolation, our alienation, and actually then incorporate in a very nonviolent way, in a very communal way, in a very peaceful way, a way to heal ourselves. And I know that yesterday the conversation became a little bit contentious, and I think that what we are often forgetting, that we are in need of healing ourselves. And that is what Gandhi taught us so beautifully, that we have to work on ourselves. We have to give up our ego, and we have to also learn that suffering is part of our life, but how to make suffering a way in which we can change our circumstances through communal action, through organized action, and help one another in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. And so our next speaker is Dr. Sumita Sarma, who I met only yesterday. But she is speaking on another very relevant topic to our contemporary era, Gandhian ethics in business education and practice. Dr. Sarma is from CSU Bakersfield, so please welcome Dr. Sumita Sarma.
Thank you so much. I am Sumita, and my presentation today is going to be a little bit different because what I'm going to talk here about Dharma in action, no doubt, but it's about Gandhian ethics when it comes to business education and research and practice. Now, I'm a little bit curious to know, especially from the students, when you say business, what comes to your mind? Money? Yes, yes. I mean, in business, we always think about how do we make money, right? And like it or not, even the not-for-profits, for-profit businesses, everyone, I mean, even in Gandhi's ashram, maybe, you need to make money, right? You need to sustain your operations. You need to still, keep volunteers. You need to still feed the people, maybe, even if you're doing it in a non-profitable way. But yeah, students, I mean, yes, definitely you should be thinking about making money. But then also at the same time, I think it's important we start thinking about the society, which is the people portion, and also start thinking about the planet, right? Maybe things are good as of now, but think about, I mean, I'm afraid thinking of my children and even grandchildren, what they're going to face with all the different wildfires and also, what we are going through right now, the shutdown, political chaos and whatnot, and the environment. So I think it's high time that we pay more attention as to how we could bring in ethics into business so that we are, yes, please think about making money, but make money in a responsible manner. And I think that is where, Gandhian ethics could play a lot of role. That's my belief. So here, when you think about making money and when you think about, embedding this ethics, I find it's difficult. There is a tension. There is kind of like a trade-off. So especially when I talk to my students, and especially if they're like freshmen undergrad students, and normally I teach the MBA students. Now the MBA students, where they come from, they are all about making profits. This is the way we do business. This is how we should be doing. And the moment I take I get a little bit tense myself when I talk about Gandhian ethics in my MBA classes. Because to hone to them the point that, hey, yes, you have to make money, you have to think about the strategy that you are doing, because at the end of the day, you are going to be making the strategic planning, you are going to be maybe participating. In fact, I have a student who is the CEO of a high-tech startup, and I'm like, yes, when you're doing startups, you're all about scaling, you're all about growth, you are fundraising, but then at the same time, you're so pressurized to show action and profits and return to the shareholders that sometimes you tend to do things that are unethical. May not be necessarily illegal, you are still complying, but you are maybe not ethical. So there is where, that trade-off, it's kind of a little bit difficult when we start talking about ethics, especially in a business class. And I feel that the Gandhian framework offers very, very good way to build into that how some of his principles, which I believe are mostly universal, could be applied in the business scenario. And this is a slide I have, but you already are more, much more knowledgeable about, than me when it comes to Gandhian ethics. We all know Gandhi as, the one who really fought for India's freedom and ultimately succeeded in freeing us from the colonial rule. But then, as Gandhi was influenced by scholars like Leo Tolstoy, as Professor Clooney was talking to us yesterday, and also by John Ruskin, I believe, and a few great other thought leaders, similarly, Gandhi influenced many great leaders as well, right? I mean, when we talk about Cesar Chavez, I mean, back in Bakersfield, where I'm from, Cesar Chavez is a big figure, and I really do want to invite, Paul and Paul Chavez, his son, and his grandson, Andres Chavez, during, Gandhi Week or Gandhi Entrepreneurship Week, so that they could talk about how Caesar was influenced by Gandhi in a very big way. again, we see, Nelson Mandela, and we had all of those great examples, Rosa Parks, etc., how they were so influenced by Gandhi. So Gandhi, yes, sometimes could be a little bit contradictory, as I am not a Gandhi scholar, but I was greatly influenced because one of my paternal uncles was a freedom fighter who met with Gandhi, and my father used to be a person who is very truthful, maybe the truthful thing he got from Gandhi. And I'm also like, okay, I really imbibe that value. But then here at the same time, sometimes, I worry that, okay, what are some of the takeaways that we could get from this, great personality so that we could really start teaching our students and our future leaders that, okay, we are applying Gandhian principles when we are doing business. Sometimes they do business, but even, when I used to work in India in a company called Steel Authority of India Limited, I was, as a manager, partly responsible for what is called the corporate social responsibility. So there we were supposed to be using 2% of our profits for uplifting a village or developing infrastructure, providing healthcare, etc. And then I came to know that actually this was influenced by Gandhi. But when I talk to my manager, or even to someone who is more at a higher level, like in a board meeting, like a managing director, and they actually did not have any clue that it was Gandhi who influenced that. But my belief is that in the 2013 Companies Act in India, it became a mandate. Hey, no matter how much profit you make, 2% of it goes back to CSR. But here, of course, I know sometimes it's a greenwashing because you are doing things post, you do the damage, and then you're trying to mend its way. But even then, something good rather than not. So I think Gandhi has had a very good influence there, for sure. And here, as I was trying to write this paper, and I've already written a book chapter, as I was trying to find a gap that coming from where I come from a very business and management background, where could be the gap that I could really argue that, hey, this is somewhere that we could really apply Gandhian principles to business. And there, what I found while, reviewing different kinds of literature is that business ethics and decision-making frameworks, they're mostly informed by Western scholars. Think about, deontology or utilitarianism, etc. And where, yes, they talk about, having good for the greatest number of people, but it's not like you want everyone to be doing well. So that is where, as Dr. Howard says all the time, it's Sarvodaya, right? Uplift of all, including the marginalized sections of the society. So, there the Western theories, I would say, is a little bit different because they are not thinking of each and every one. It's mostly the greatest number. So I think there we do have this gap. And also I found a few calls from scholars where they're saying, hey, we need some more frameworks from the global south or the decolonial perspectives to inform our decision making, especially in this, so chaotic situation where we are doing business. I think, that is where the gap truly lies. Okay, now let me kind of show you which are some of the principles I've been trying to study for so now. I came across a very good book. They really talk about the subject that I am interested in, application of Gandhian principles in social entrepreneurship. But then I found that, yes, one is talking about Gandhi, and then suddenly you are talking about social entrepreneurship. Sometimes people find it very difficult to even know what it means, especially when it comes to, pedagogy and talking to students in the classroom and even to some of my colleagues. So it's more like, okay, start off at a more higher level where you're talking about, okay, business. And then you are talking about entrepreneurs, yes, people who find a problem that's worth solving, and you go ahead and try to build a solution that's worth building. And then comes social entrepreneurship. that yes, you are a company, maybe a for-profit, but then you are also having a social goal or an environmental goal. And here, as you could see, the first one I have there, oh, sorry, I have not been moving my slides. You know, I didn't have a script, I just had a copy of my slides. Sorry about that. Okay, the first one that you see up here is Satya, which is truth. Now, can you think of, I mean, I don't want to put anyone on a spot or anything of that kind. I mean, could you think of a scandal or, you know, of a business that was, you know, called to action or sent to jail because they were not truthful? Anything comes to mind to anyone? Oh, okay. Sir, would you want to explain on that? Uh-huh. Yes, USG Optum, yeah. I mean, the CEO got shot, right, in New York. So, yeah, and they have been brought under, you know, some observance because of the things that they have been doing. Thank you, sir. That's a great example. And another great example that I like to give my students is of Elizabeth Holmes, if you have heard of her. She founded a company called Theranos, and she was great. You know, she was like a Stanford graduate, and yeah, and she used to say, you know, I really am afraid of drawing blood because it's so painful. And for me too, I mean, every time, you know, there is an annual physical, I'm like, oh, no, can't you take just one drop of blood? But it's so many vials, right? Now this girl, very bright, intelligent, you know, engineer, she said, you know what, I'm just going to have a machine that draws one single drop of blood and have all these, you know, 200 tests done. So good to be true, right? And then she hired so many engineers. She had top people on board. She raised lots of money. Even her professor at Stanford, he gave up his job to become a part of her startup. And then when they started this, you know, in the Walgreens in Arizona, there the fraud came to light. Because, you know, the people came, they gave a drop of blood, and then they said that, yeah, you know what, we have to send all of those samples to Palo Alto because of some machine problem, whatever. And then the results started coming back all wrong. And even cancer patients who were put on a trial, they were put into risk because this girl, she was not truthful at all. I mean, she was like, yeah. And every time the FDA comes in to look into the machine, she used to be so charismatic and she used to imitate Steve Jobs working, you know, or wearing those big, you know, turtlenecks and sounding like him with a deep voice, that somehow she duped the FDA and started with the clinic. And then, you know, when people started, even I think there were some deaths as well. And then I think all of those things came to light. And then now she's serving time in jail. And the other day I saw a photo of her. I mean, seems to be doing great. I hope she's remorseful about this. And I think the core value here that was missing was that she was totally been dishonest, totally been so untruthful and playing with the lives of people. So yes, in business, one needs to be truthful, one needs to be transparent, like it or not. Now, when we talk about ahimsa or nonviolence, and I think our keynote, you know, all the experts yesterday, they explained it so well. I mean, nonviolence is not just harming, you know, the flora and fauna or a human being. It's also, you do not want to rile up anyone. You do not want to exploit anyone. So that is also where, you know, I think ahimsa or nonviolence comes into the picture. And definitely for sure, when I tell my students, it's more about we are seeing so much of ecological degradation. So how do we, you know, adopt this principle so that try to preserve some of the resources for progeny. Then the third principle that I really like, but it's a little bit tricky as well, is the idea of trusteeship. Here, when we go back to India, I talked with one manager. He seemed pretty knowledgeable. The Tata Group, they really adopt this principle of trusteeship. So here, I don't know in the US, if it's like a totally for commercial business, whether the stakeholders, not the stakeholders, the shareholders, who are like a small part of this big umbrella of stakeholders, whether the shareholders would be okay to, just take not the whole dividend, but a little part of it, and then, share the remaining with the rest. I don't know how exactly that would work out, but that is what actually trusteeship means. It means the wealth is not your personal gain. You have to keep as much as you need, and then you're supposed to be sharing the rest with the others. So I think that's one very good principle. And Sarvodaya, I mean, again, Dr. Howard, one of your themes is Sarvodaya and peace, right? So that's definitely what we mean by uplift of all, welfare of all. Very contrary to what we are seeing right now in some places. So I think for younger people, for younger students who come in, it might be a great idea if they are taught this principle and how you should start thinking about the upliftment of everyone rather than just about yourself. And the last principle, but not the least, is what is called Swaraj. We could interpret it in different ways. Definitely, Swaraj is something which could also be trying to become self-reliant. So when Gandhiji was talking about Gram Swaraj, he was really meaning to be the rural areas and villages to be self-sufficient. And we do see that in some American companies. So if you think of the company Patagonia, you see that they are doing a lot because they really try to go local in terms of sourcing their ingredients. So they are trying to grow local and empower that local community. So that could be definitely one way to go forward. Here again, when it comes to business knowledge or the classroom teaching, I do give students, some interactive exercises, role playing, because when you think about business or for that matter, any kind of organization, it's all made by people, right? I mean, when we think about organization, sometimes we think about some innate object that exists, but at the end of the day, it's all made by people, all made by people who have all these biases and blind spots. So it normally what it boils down to at the end of the day is the amount of interactions that you have with one another, right? And here, as I'm writing out here, what I normally try to do is, start by helping students understand how they view the world, what their own moral compass is, and how do those relate with some of the Gandhian principles that I mainly try to focus on. So that's more like for pedagogy. And for the checklist, this is a checklist that I again provide, even in the paper that I'm writing, so that we could kind of see, what are the different principles, what exactly does it mean, but then I definitely have to, work more into providing all of the different references and citations for sure. When it comes to applying it to the different business courses, here I have just listed these two of them. Few of them. One is definitely, think about leadership. I mean, sometimes I tell my students, even as a faculty member, I get so frustrated because sometimes I feel maybe even our, sorry to administrators who are here, they may not be transparent or they may not be, we may not be having the full information. So, when there is that kind of, you're second guessing everything as to what is happening, don't know the budget situation and all of that stuff, it can really become very, very difficult to become more productive, to remain genuine, and to really contribute. So I think in that leadership, there are actually all of those principles which could be applied. Again, for time, I don't know, we don't have too much time. Yes, I'll try to wrap up. Sorry, I tend to talk a little bit too much. Yeah, and then again, when I talk about strategic management and entrepreneurship, which are my two, subjects close to my heart, I keep on honing that, these are something that you need to be thinking about, no matter how resource constrained you are at this point of time. And the second part is definitely how we could apply this content framework in the entire business academy, thinking more about research and then also for the practitioners. So that at the end of the day, maybe, talk to people who are CEOs and invite them in for this type of sessions. And this is where I am giving some examples where some of these principles, and again, all the 5 that I had showed before could be applied. And these are the questions that I feel that we could be researching more on so that those could have practical implications. Again, I'm not going to go into one of those, but definitely the first one that's going beyond profits. So I don't know, the students, you might have heard of the 3 Ps, right? The 3 Ps meaning that you are thinking about people, planet, and profit. So, well, don't just think about the profits. You have to, if you're in business, but then please think about the people and the planet as well. Okay, and here, it's more about inclusivity and governance. These are some of the practical implications which could be put into practice. And these are some cautions, as I said, how we should interpret some of those Gandhian principles as we apply them to business. But at the end of the day, one needs to be a good citizen and one needs to be a good corporate citizen for sure. And these are some of my future directions and conclusions. But I'll stop here. And thank you so much for a patient listening.
Thank you, Dr. Sarma. We have about 7 minutes. If the speakers would like to come up to the front, and we have time for a few questions. And so, who has a question? And please indicate which of the speakers your question is directed to, or maybe even if it's more than one. Yes, Dr. Chapa.
My question is for it's a material question. And as we looked at your slides, there was a day when they were all in orange and red, and in your parting slide, they were all in pink and in black. And I'm wondering, to what degree do the textiles develop a sense of community among women within Jain faith and culture?
Yeah, thank you for your question. One minute. Is it on?
I believe
Yeah.
the green light's on. So, yeah.
So the one in orange, that was a workshop. So there was a woman dressed in a sari. That's an announcement of a event, like they have this workshop where youth are invited so that they talk about traditional dressing, clothing. So these days they have such instead of having workshops only that talk about next life or that talk about Jain realities or fundamental principles, the workshops are more oriented towards more practical contemporary life questions. And when they are all in orange sari, that means that's a dress code for Women Association, who has organized this workshop on how to dress up, in a more traditional way. And the one which had all colorful women, that is a picture from my Ahmedabad interview, where I was just sitting with women from all age groups, trying to ask and see what they think about these questions. So the 2 pictures are from 2 different times.
Okay, and I said okay, so there's a gentleman in the back, and then hi, yes, from yesterday, yes.
Yes. Hi, my name is Samiksha. Thank you so much for the presentations. They were great. I learned so much. I have two questions, if I'm allowed. One for Renu and the other for Shivani. Shivani, yes. So, Venu, I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more about alochana, that is, I'm translating it as criticism, and forgiveness. There was one slide where you mentioned alochana and criticism, alochana and forgiveness together. So I just wanted to understand how these two categories are working together. Should I also state my second question?
Go
Okay.
ahead, yeah, if you
Okay.
want to, yeah.
And for Shivani, it's a more like gender-based question. So you explained more about Aparna, who has two daughters. So I wanted to know if you interviewed women who had boys, and they also took similar responsibilities to instill the same things into the boys as our mothers do to us, whether that's happening for the boys as well. That's it. Thank you so very much.
Okay.
So, what's the name? Thank you for your fantastic question, I would say. I couldn't continue with the entire presentation and my other research and other the way they responded. So I had many mothers who had one son and one daughter, but they said that in terms of transmitting these values, whether it is dietary or whether it is doing a ritual practice, it doesn't matter whether they are boys or girls. Aparna, in fact, also said in one of our interviews, because tying back to the story of Madalsa, she said that she wished she had a son, and then she would want to, kind of emulate what Madalsa did for her children. But across so many, there were 30 interviews. There were children who were boys and girls both.
And then the first question?
Thank you for the question. So, in the joint context, and we know that alochana, it's a very pan-Indian word that we even use in modern Hindi and also in other modern vernacular languages as criticism. But for the joint context, it's about definitely the nature is criticizing, but it's about like confessing one's own fault. So it's a it's a linguistically different philosophical meaning. So, and then if it's like confessing one's fault, then it's directly connected to forgiveness. So it wouldn't be the alochna, meaning criticizing bitterly and harshly someone, or passing on comments. Yeah, thank you. It's an introspection. So you do the introspection and then you confess. So it's it is a criticism, but not in a very bitter way, but like to be more, vigilant about your own deeds that you shouldn't do.
That's it. In the modern Vedanta tradition, Sharada Devi also says, let us not find fault with others if we want peace in mind, but find fault with ourselves.
Yes.
Yes. So we have a question in the back.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm sitting in the back, so I'm not wearing my glasses, so bear with me if I miss the name of any four of you. But one of you did mention Gandhi had a racial train incident in South Africa. And I think our Mr. Jan also mentioned it yesterday. Just want to give you an update, that incident never happened. Mr. Gandhi has been lied to. Please contact me, I'll give you evidence. Now, let's move on to the last one, Dr. Sarma. Am I right? Yeah. Just out of curiosity, Mr. Gandhi lived in India when he came out of South Africa for 33 years, from 1915 to 1948. He had 4 sons, 1 wife. Never went out to make an honest living. We all work hard to make a living. We all feed our children, wife, whatever. So he was getting paid by the rich guys. So from business model, would that create an ethical and moral problem when you teach students on the ethics of business? By the way, he was getting almost $20,000 in those days.
I know.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good question, sir, and that's the reason why I'm saying that there are sometimes so many contradictions. I mean, in his own version. And Gandhiji, I think himself, he admitted in my stories with experiments of truth, that he tried to develop all of these, his philosophy or his principles or values over a period of years, right? I mean, yes, I mean, when I teach my students, I definitely have not mentioned this to them. But I think what we could convey that as being more like a social model, where yes, I mean, Gandhiji was a person who devoted his whole life to the public good and, for India's struggle. And at that point of time, he hardly had any time, or he did not have a paid occupation to provide for his wife and his 4 sons. And I know also, there are something even by his sons. I have seen one of the movies where, the son talks about so many different things, right? Because he did not have time for family, that I know. But if that question or if that tension ever came up, I would put it in that way, that he was supported by, so I know it was by an industrialist who used to pay him that amount of money every month, the amount that you're mentioning, because he was at that point really totally committed to the public. And but I'm glad to hear your opinions or a counter argument to that as well.
Okay, so I believe we've come to the end of our. Sorry. Do you want more? Yeah.
Thank you very much for your question, and I would like to respond with how Dr. Jain replied to yours yesterday, and that is, we all have our researches that we do, and in my research, I found that he was thrown out of the first-class compartment. That actually I have been, sort of hearing since I was a little kid growing up in India. And I believe that only then can you experience, after you have undergone such a humiliating experience, that you would actually then feel that you are one with people who have been colonized and, feel the humiliation that he felt. So whether it happened or not in your research, it happened in mine. And I actually do think that I like to go with the one that I felt really resonated with me. And I feel I'd like to hold on to that. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, as the chair, I'd like to have the last word on this, if I may. Every time I speak on Gandhi, I preface anything I'm going to say with the statement that Gandhi was a human being. He was imperfect, right? Someone can be, I think we should apply criticism to all of the great figures that are put before us. That doesn't mean we can't appreciate dimensions of what they have also given us. And in fact, sometimes it even, I think, accentuates our appreciation because, wow, they were human beings just like us. That means we can also do great things. So I think we can admire and draw wisdom from Gandhi without putting him on a level that is beyond, the human. I think that would and I suspect he would want that himself. He was not very. I'll end up my favorite Gandhi story. One of his somewhat over-enthusiastic followers once asked him when he was going to come forth and openly proclaim his divinity to the world. And Gandhi's reply to the young man was, "Sit down and be quiet." So with that, now we can make a lot of noise and thank our presenters, and thank you all.